Family reunions are strange things. They pretend to be about connection, but in reality they're about comparison. Who gained weight, who lost hair, who got richer, who fell behind. By the time I walked into the rented hall that afternoon, I already knew exactly where I stood in that unspoken hierarchy. I had known it my entire life. I was the one they explained away. The one whose name was followed by excuses. The one people lowered their voices about, as if failure were contagious. The room was loud with familiar voices. Tables were arranged in neat rows, decorated cheaply but proudly, as if effort alone could replace sincerity. Relatives I hadn't seen in years laughed too hard at jokes that weren't funny. Children ran between chairs. Older family members sat closer to the front, where attention naturally gathered. I took a seat near the side, not because anyone told me to, but because experience had taught me that choosing otherwise only made things awkward. I kept my expression neutral. Calm. Controlled. That calm had taken years to learn. It was the result of swallowing countless small humiliations without reacting. Reactions were what they wanted. Reactions confirmed their version of me. It didn't take long. Someone clinked a glass. A cousin I barely spoke to stood up, grinning like he was about to perform. "All right everyone," he said loudly, "before we eat, let's catch up. It's been too long." Laughter followed. He started pointing out people, calling on them to share updates. Promotions. Engagements. New homes. Applause erupted after each one. When he got to me, he didn't ask a question. He made a statement. "And then there's her," he said, smiling wider. "Still figuring things out." A few people laughed. Others looked away. No one corrected him. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the instinctive urge to shrink, to disappear into the background like I'd done so many times before. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I simply met his eyes and waited. He took my silence as permission. "You know," he continued, "it's kind of inspiring. Not everyone needs ambition. Someone has to keep expectations realistic." The laughter was louder this time. More confident. My parents were there, sitting just 2 tables away. My mother smiled weakly, as if embarrassed but unwilling to intervene. My father stared at his phone. My siblings exchanged glances, half amused, half relieved that the attention wasn't on them. I was alone in that moment. Completely. And still, I stayed quiet. What they didn't understand was that my silence wasn't agreement. It was patience. I had learned long ago that interrupting humiliation only makes people defensive. Letting it finish exposes something far more useful, their comfort with cruelty. The cousin finally moved on. The room relaxed. Conversations resumed. Plates were passed around. People assumed the moment was over. It wasn't. I reached into my bag slowly, deliberately, and felt the edge of the envelope inside. Thick. Official. Unassuming. No dramatic markings. Just weight. Real weight. The kind that changes how people speak once they know it exists. I didn't open it. I didn't show it. Not yet. I waited. Because respect, I had learned, doesn't come from demanding attention. It comes from controlling timing. Across the room, I noticed something shift. An older relative, someone who rarely looked my way, was watching me now. Not with pity. With curiosity. That alone told me everything I needed to know. The reunion continued, unaware that the balance had already started to tilt. They kept talking. Kept laughing. Kept telling stories that required me to remain small in order to make sense. They had no idea that within minutes, the same people who had just laughed would be struggling to remember exactly when they decided I didn't matter. And when the envelope finally came out, it wouldn't raise my voice. It would raise questions. I didn't rush. That was the hardest part for them to understand later. If I had stood up immediately, pulled the envelope out like a weapon, or raised my voice, it would have fit perfectly into the version of me they were comfortable with. Emotional, impulsive, dramatic. Someone whose reaction justified the mockery. So I stayed seated. I ate slowly. I listened. I smiled when spoken to. I let time stretch just enough for confidence to harden into carelessness. The cousin who had made the joke relaxed into his chair, satisfied. He had gotten his laugh. Others followed his lead, the way groups always do when someone establishes permission. Small comments floated around. She's always been different. Not everyone's built for pressure. At least she seems happy. Each sentence sounded harmless on its own. Together, they formed a verdict. My parents drifted closer after a while, as if proximity could replace intervention. My mother asked if I wanted more food. My father commented on the weather. Neither mentioned what had happened. They never did. Silence had always been their way of choosing sides without admitting it. I nodded politely, answered in short sentences, and waited. The envelope stayed in my bag, heavy and patient. I could feel it every time I shifted. It grounded me. Reminded me that this moment wasn't about survival anymore. It was about exposure. Across the room, my grandfather's brother, the family elder everyone deferred to when money or decisions were involved, had stopped talking. He was watching me openly now, his brow furrowed, as if something didn't add up. He had known me when I was younger. He remembered things others had conveniently forgotten. Intelligence. Curiosity. The questions I used to ask before I learned how unwelcome they were. He stood up slowly, clearing his throat. The room quieted out of habit. "I'd like to say something," he said. People turned toward him immediately. Authority has a way of silencing even the loudest rooms. "We've been laughing a lot today," he continued, glancing around. "And while that's fine, I want to remind everyone that family gatherings aren't meant to rank each other." A few uncomfortable nods followed. My cousin shifted in his seat. "I'm not calling anyone out," the elder added, which was exactly what he was doing. "But I am saying that assumptions have a way of embarrassing the people who make them." The room murmured. Some people laughed nervously, assuming this was a general comment. Others began to sense that something had gone wrong. The elder looked at me. "Would you like to say anything?" Every instinct screamed at me to decline. That was the old reflex. The one that kept me small. But this time, I felt something different, control. I stood up calmly, brushing invisible dust from my clothes, and reached into my bag. The room leaned forward without realizing it. "I wasn't planning to speak," I said evenly. "But since my life was summarized earlier, I think it's fair to add context." I pulled out the envelope and held it loosely at my side. I didn't open it. I didn't wave it around. I just let it be seen. "This arrived last week," I continued. "I was told to bring it here. Not to interrupt. Not to accuse. Just to make sure it reached the right people." My mother's face tightened. My father's eyes locked onto the envelope like it might explode. "What is it?" someone asked from the back. I met the elder's gaze. "It's documentation." The word alone changed the air. My cousin laughed weakly. "Documentation of what?" I smiled. Not out of spite. Out of certainty. Of decisions made about me. Without me. The elder gestured for me to continue. "This envelope contains records," I said, my voice steady, "that explain why I've appeared behind for so long. Why opportunities one should have had never arrived. Why certain paths were quietly closed before I could walk them." My parents stood up at the same time. "That's enough," my father said sharply. "This is not the place." The elder raised a hand, silencing him. "Sit down." The authority in his voice left no room for argument. My father sat. I took a breath. "I didn't ask for this to be public," I said. But since my reputation already is, I won't protect a lie. I placed the envelope on the nearest table and slid it toward the elder. You should read it. The room held its breath. He opened it slowly, scanning the first page. His expression shifted almost immediately, from curiosity to disbelief, then to something heavier. He looked up. Is this accurate? Yes, I said. Every page. He turned another page, then another. He didn't rush. He didn't skim. Each second stretched the tension tighter. Around us, people whispered. Some stood. Others leaned closer. My cousin's smile was gone. My mother's hands were shaking. My siblings stared at the floor. The elder finally closed the envelope. I think, he said carefully, we need to pause this gathering. A wave of confusion rippled through the room. Because, he continued, looking directly at my parents, if this is what it appears to be, then the story we've all been telling ourselves is not just wrong. It's convenient. Silence fell, thick, uncomfortable, unavoidable. And in that silence, I realized something important. They weren't laughing anymore. They were calculating. The elder didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse anyone directly. He simply stood there, holding the envelope like it weighed more than paper ever should. That silence did what shouting never could. People shifted in their seats. Conversations tried to restart and failed. The room understood, instinctively, that whatever was inside that envelope had already begun rewriting the hierarchy everyone had walked in believing. Sit, the elder repeated, calmly this time, when my parents tried to speak again. They sat. He turned the first page outward, not for the crowd, but for the small circle at the front. My parents, my siblings, the cousin who had laughed the loudest. His finger traced a line of text. Dates. Signatures. Decisions made years ago. Decisions that explained absence, delay, and the convenient myth of my incompetence. These approvals, he said, tapping the page, were rerouted. My father's jaw tightened. My mother stared straight ahead, eyes glassy. And these recommendations, the elder continued, turning another page, were withdrawn after the fact. He looked up. Do you recognize these names? My father nodded once. Barely. The elder turned another page. And this is where it becomes intentional. A murmur rippled through the room. People leaned closer without realizing they had stood. The cousin who had joked earlier tried to laugh it off, but the sound died before it reached anyone. I stayed quiet. I didn't explain. I didn't interrupt. The envelope was doing exactly what it had been meant to do. The elder closed the file and looked at me. Why bring this here? Because this is where the story was told, I replied evenly. So this is where it should end. He nodded slowly, understanding settling into his expression. Then he turned back to the room. What you heard earlier, he said, was a narrative. What you see now is a record. That distinction landed hard. Respect didn't shift all at once. It never does. It moved in small, visible ways. People stopped looking at my parents for cues. A few stepped back, physically, as if distance could protect them from implication. Someone whispered my name, not with amusement, but with surprise. The elder cleared his throat. This gathering is adjourned. No one argued. As people began to disperse, the cousin approached me, his earlier confidence gone. I didn't know, he said quickly. It was just a joke. I know, I replied. That's why it worked. He swallowed and stepped aside. My parents approached last. They stood in front of me like guests unsure of the rules in a room they once controlled. My mother reached out, stopped, and let her hand fall. We were trying to manage things, she said softly. For yourselves, I replied. Not for me. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left that wouldn't sound like explanation. I don't want an apology, I said. I wanted accuracy. They nodded. Slowly. Painfully. Outside, the air felt lighter. Not because something had been gained, but because something heavy had finally been put down. People passed me on their way out, offering small acknowledgments, a nod, a quiet greeting, a look that lingered just long enough to signal recalibration. The elder walked beside me to the door. "You could have exposed this earlier," he said. "Yes," I replied. "But then it would have looked like anger." "And now?" "Now it looks like truth." He smiled once. Timing matters. I stepped into the evening without applause, without confrontation, without needing to say another word. The envelope stayed behind, its job done. The story they had told about me for years no longer fit the facts, and no amount of laughter could force it to. They let everyone mock me. And in doing so, they handed me the only thing that lasts. Respect, earned, irreversible, and finally mine.